Beverly Edwards entered Ruth Ann's roost just after 8:15 a.m., as she had every Saturday for the past 5 years. The cool autumn air carried the scent of fresh bread and apple cider from the farmer's market down the street. Sunlight filtered through the cafe windows, warming her cream-colored cardigan and highlighting the wrinkles around her eyes, each one a memory etched from decades of teaching. She took her usual seat by the window, unfolded a napkin across her lap, and set her scone on a small plate. For a few peaceful minutes, the cafe hummed softly around her, the espresso machine hissing like a heartbeat. Beverly sipped her small decaf, enjoying the routine, unaware that the calm was about to be shattered. The black Escalade pulled up outside, parking carelessly across two spaces. Craig Davenport stepped out, mid-40s, in a tailored navy blazer and silver watch, talking loudly into his phone. He cut to the front of the line, ordered a complicated drink, and then walked to Beverly's table without asking or acknowledging her. He sat down across from her, his cup landing hard enough to spill a few drops. Beverly glanced up, offering a polite smile, but the man's eyes narrowed in contempt. A few drops of coffee from her scone brushed his cup, and that was all it took. Craig's nostrils flared, jaw tightening. "Did you just touch my cup?" he demanded. Beverly's soft apology only fueled his anger. He waved a napkin over the spilled drops, dropping it on her side of the table with exaggerated disgust. The cafe had gone quiet. Ruth Ann froze behind the counter, watching the confrontation unfold. Craig's voice carried across the room, sharp and mocking. Beverly, 68, retired schoolteacher and grandmother, remained seated, hands folded calmly in her lap, despite the venom pouring at her. He leaned closer, his cologne suffocating. "Where are you even from? Because this isn't your kind of place." Beverly's voice barely rose above a whisper. "I've lived here for 42 years, sir." Craig's laughter was cruel, designed to humiliate. Crumbs from her scone caught his attention. "Are you an animal?" he spat. Beverly's hand trembled as she reached for her napkin, but he waved her off. In a swift motion, he grabbed her coffee and poured it over her cardigan, soaking her from chest to skirt. Shock froze her in place. The cafe was still. Patrons stared, silent. Ruth Ann called 911, her hands shaking. Beverly held a small, cracked photograph of her late husband, James, pressed to her chest. A single tear ran down her cheek and she whispered, "I just wanted my Saturday." Outside, Craig laughed into his phone, oblivious to the storm he had stirred. Deputy Nathan Moore arrived 6 minutes later, but he approached Craig first. Craig spun a story of provocation, painting Beverly as the aggressor. Moore nodded without scrutiny, leaving Beverly standing alone in the lot, coffee-stained and trembling. Beverly reached for her phone, calling her son. "Brandon, I need you. I'm at Ruth Ann's." A cold, commanding voice answered, "Don't move, Mama. I'm 20 minutes out." She straightened, holding onto the stained cardigan, waiting. Craig smirked, unaware that reinforcements were on the way. A low rumble approached, a black Chevrolet Suburban pulling into the lot. Colonel Brandon Edwards emerged, United States Army dress uniform impeccable, boots hitting gravel without a sound. He walked straight to Beverly, ignoring Craig and the deputy, his presence commanding and calm. Beverly softened at the sight of her son. He lifted her hand, feeling her trembling, and held her for a brief moment. Craig's smirk faltered. Brandon's eyes were fixed on his mother, his authority radiating. Craig realized too late that he had misjudged the woman sitting quietly in a cream cardigan. Beverly had endured, she had waited, and now justice was coming. The atmosphere shifted, tension coiling like a spring about to release. Outside the cafe, the autumn sun caught the gold ribbons on Brandon's chest, and the silent promise of retribution lingered in the air, poised to unfold. Craig Davenport's confidence faltered as Brandon Edwards stood firmly between him and Beverly. The sunlight glinted off the Suburban's black paint, and every eye in the parking lot was on the confrontation. Tiffany Davenport's face lost its carefully maintained composure. Her sunglasses slipped down her nose, revealing wide eyes. Deputy Moore shuffled uncomfortably, realizing the power dynamic had shifted entirely. Brandon spoke calmly, but with authority that left no room for negotiation. "Who threw coffee on my mother?" His words carried across the lot, clear and precise, a command that demanded truth. Craig stammered, trying to twist the story, but Brandon's calm stare held him in place. Ruth Ann stepped forward, recounting every detail of the incident, from the initial scuffle to the pouring of the coffee. Witnesses nodded in confirmation. Brandon's presence brought order to chaos, every movement calculated, every word deliberate. The teenager recording the scene with her phone captured every second. Brandon's voice remained steady, his uniform immaculate, ribbons reflecting the morning sun, projecting a presence that silenced the arrogant man. This constitutes assault and battery under Virginia Code 18.257, with a potential hate crime enhancement under subsection C, he stated. Craig paled, realizing the weight of authority he was up against. Brandon signaled the next step, dialing a direct line, bypassing standard emergency channels. Within minutes, a senior officer arrived, reinforcing the authority Brandon represented. Sergeant Dwight Lawson, tall and silver-haired, greeted Brandon with a nod, acknowledgement between veterans of respect forged in service. Lawson and Brandon coordinated, gathering statements, confirming video evidence, and establishing that Beverly was the victim. Craig's bravado evaporated. He now faced real consequences. The lot had gone still, the banjo from the market now a distant, inconsequential sound. Beverly, still holding her handbag and the stained photograph of her late husband, James, remained calm despite the tremor of fear in her hands. Brandon remained by her side, offering silent support, his presence both shield and reassurance. Craig was formally arrested, cuffs clicking into place, and Tiffany followed him in stunned silence. The gathered crowd recorded the moment, phones capturing every detail for the public record. Brandon guided Beverly back to her side, assuring her safety. The parking lot, once tense and hostile, had transformed into a stage of justice. Every witness understood the gravity of the moment, the balance of power finally corrected. Beverly, quiet and resolute, felt the first wave of relief, her Saturday shattered, but her dignity preserved. As Craig and Tiffany were led away, Brandon ensured that the young woman recording and other witnesses remained safe, confirming that Beverly's voice had been amplified, not drowned out. Justice, long delayed in the cafe, was finally manifest. Brandon Edwards had restored order, respect, and the reminder that courage and preparation can overturn arrogance. The autumn wind stirred, scattering leaves across the lot as Beverly clutched her photograph, her eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. This small town, quiet for decades, had witnessed a turning point. Beverly's patience and resilience, paired with her son's authority, had altered the course of a morning that had begun with humiliation and pain. The aftermath of the arrest settled over Ruth Ann's roost like a heavy fog. Beverly sat on the wooden bench outside, Brandon beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. The warm sunlight kissed her face, yet the coffee stain on her cardigan was a constant reminder of the morning's humiliation. Yet there was also a sense of calm, the storm had passed, and authority had been restored. Nearby, Sergeant Lawson coordinated with Deputy Moore, reviewing body camera footage and ensuring that the sequence of events was fully documented. Craig Davenport, subdued and cuffed, was being escorted to the patrol car, his previous arrogance stripped away, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Tiffany followed reluctantly, her designer handbag clutched tightly, realizing the public display of their disgrace. Brandon's mind was already calculating the next steps, ensuring that legal proceedings would reinforce Beverly's dignity and safety. Inside the cafe, Ruth Ann carefully wiped down tables, her hands shaking slightly from the morning's events. Patrons whispered amongst themselves, a mix of relief, awe, and lingering unease. Beverly's scone sat on a small plate, now cold, but she hardly noticed. The photograph of her late husband, James, now safely tucked back in her handbag, felt like a talisman of resilience, a symbol of the life she had built and protected. Brandon pulled out his phone, sending a series of texts to coordinate with legal counsel and ensure that the footage captured by the teenager would be preserved. News of the incident was already spreading, and he knew it was essential to control the narrative, ensuring that the truth about his mother's dignity and Craig's misconduct was clear. Beverly's eyes, though tired and damp from tears, reflected trust in her son's careful, deliberate movements. She understood that justice required patience, planning, and presence of mind. As the crowd thinned, the afternoon sun glinted off the parked vehicles, shadows stretching long across the parking lot. The banjo music from the farmer's market floated faintly through the air. a reminder of life continuing around the edges of personal crises. Brandon whispered a gentle reminder to his mother, encouraging her to breathe, to let the tension leave her body. Ruth Ann approached with fresh decaf and a warm blueberry scone, setting it on the table with a quiet, reassuring smile. Beverly's hands closed around the cup, drawing warmth and a sense of normalcy. Despite the chaos, the ritual of small comforts reminded her of the life she had patiently built and protected. Each witness, each bystander had silently acknowledged the wrong that had been done, and in some small way, the community had participated in restoring equilibrium. Beverly allowed herself a brief, steadying sigh, her eyes scanning the lot, noting the retreating figures of those who had once watched silently. Today, silence had been broken, dignity restored, and the first steps toward accountability firmly established. The day would not be forgotten, but Beverly and Brandon knew that the moral arc of the morning had bent toward justice, and the ripple effects would extend far beyond Ruth Ann's roost. By the time evening arrived, Beverly and Brandon returned home, the autumn air crisp around them. Beverly's cardigan had dried stiffly, a muted reminder of the morning's chaos, but her spirit remained intact. Brandon guided her inside, helping her settle in with a fresh cup of tea and a quiet, warm throw over her shoulders. He replayed the events in his mind, thinking of every angle, every witness, and every piece of evidence that had been captured. He knew that while the immediate danger had passed, the aftermath required careful attention to ensure accountability. Beverly held the cup tightly, letting the warmth seep into her hands, feeling a small measure of comfort after the long day. Brandon's phone buzzed continuously. Updates from attorneys, local news outlets, and family friends who had witnessed or heard about the incident. The footage from the teenager's phone had gone viral, spreading rapidly through social media, igniting outrage over the public humiliation Beverly had endured. Brandon's plan was meticulous. He would ensure that legal channels reinforced the moral rightness of their position. Meanwhile, Beverly reflected on her life, the years of teaching, the countless students she had guided, and the lessons of resilience she had imparted, now mirrored back to her in the form of her son's decisive intervention. The air in the room was quiet, punctuated only by the ticking of a clock and the distant hum of cars outside. Brandon sat beside her, offering a silent presence that was both protective and grounding. They spoke little, each moment of silence carrying layers of shared understanding and unspoken gratitude. The next morning, the story had made local headlines, and reporters were seeking interviews. Beverly felt a mixture of apprehension and relief, knowing that her voice, long quiet, was finally being heard. Brandon assured her that they would navigate the media attention carefully, preserving her dignity and ensuring the facts remained clear. Together, they mapped out the steps for legal proceedings, the civil suit, and the protection of evidence. Despite the previous day's chaos, Beverly felt a measure of empowerment. Her life's lessons, patience, and composure had helped navigate a situation designed to humiliate her. Outside, Collinsville continued its Saturday rhythm. The farmers' market hummed with activity, the banjo music drifting faintly, blending with the chatter of townspeople. Beverly's neighbors greeted her with smiles and acknowledgement, small gestures of solidarity that reminded her of the community's enduring strength. Brandon reminded her that courage often requires patience and the quiet assertion of presence. Beverly sipped her tea, feeling gratitude not for the drama, but for the moments of kindness, clarity, and justice that had prevailed. Today was a turning point, a reminder that dignity and resilience can withstand humiliation, and that the bonds of family and moral authority can correct injustice, even when others remain passive. Brandon's gaze, steady and resolute, mirrored the protection he offered, a reassurance that Beverly's voice, her life, and her story would not be silenced again. Over the following days, Beverly Edwards adjusted to a new reality. Her cardigan was clean, freshly laundered, but the memory of the coffee and the humiliation lingered like a shadow. Brandon remained close, ensuring she had support and that every legal and public action was being managed. The video footage circulated widely, with thousands commenting, sharing, and demanding accountability. Collinsville, a town usually quiet and insular, became the focal point of a conversation about respect, civility, and the protection of the vulnerable. Beverly, ever reflective, thought back to her decades of teaching, the countless children she had guided, and the lessons of patience, resilience, and moral courage she had tried to instill. Now, in her later years, She found herself the subject of those lessons, experiencing both the challenge and vindication that came with enduring public humiliation with dignity. Brandon coordinated meetings with attorneys, journalists, and community leaders, ensuring that Beverly's story was told accurately and without distortion. He understood that the narrative would shape public perception and the outcome of legal proceedings. Meanwhile, the community responded. Former students reached out, expressing concern, support, and gratitude for the example Beverly had set. Neighbors shared small acts of kindness, delivering flowers, baked goods, or simply offering a quiet word of encouragement. Beverly absorbed these gestures quietly, her composure intact, grateful for the human connection reaffirming the lessons of a lifetime. The legal team began filing motions, compiling evidence, and documenting the pattern of Craig Davenport's behavior. Not just the incident in the cafe, but his record of intimidation and displacement in the town. Brandon worked closely with them, providing both moral support and tactical insight, drawing on his military experience to anticipate every possible maneuver from the opposing side. Beverly reflected on the public's response, the surge of support and outrage that validated her suffering and turned a personal indignity into a catalyst for community awareness and justice. Each day she felt a gradual restoration of power and dignity, knowing that the system, when guided by truth and courage, could serve as a counterweight to arrogance and cruelty. Evenings were quiet, a chance for reflection, tea, and the small comfort of routine. Brandon remained ever vigilant, ensuring she rested, ate well, and understood that while the world might have tried to diminish her, her legacy of patience, kindness, and moral integrity would prevail. The first steps of a broader movement, advocating for respect, equity, and the accountability of those who wield influence without conscience, were now underway. Beverly understood that courage, resilience, and the support of family and community were the strongest shields against injustice, and that sometimes the smallest actions, the calm refusal to bow, the quiet endurance of humiliation could catalyze the most profound change. By the middle of the week, Beverly's story had spread across Collinsville and beyond. Local reporters wanted interviews, neighbors offered their support, and her phone rang with well-wishes from former students. Brandon coordinated with the Virginia Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund, ensuring that the civil case against Craig Davenport was documented meticulously. Evidence included not only the video from the cafe, but also testimony from former tenants displaced by Craig's aggressive property acquisitions. Beverly followed the proceedings quietly, sitting in her navy dress as she had during interviews, her composure steady yet reflective. She understood the significance. The case was no longer just about a spilled coffee or public humiliation. It represented decades of injustice faced by the community. Each day brought updates, emails from attorneys, and social media notifications tracking the spread of her story. Beverly felt a complex mix of relief, exhaustion, and cautious anticipation. Brandon remained her anchor, translating legal jargon, guiding her responses, and ensuring she was not overwhelmed by the media attention. Outside, the town had started to shift subtly. Familiar faces greeted Beverly with warmth, strangers nodded in recognition, and the cafe regained its gentle Saturday rhythm. Ruth Ann prepared her usual orders but added a plate of extra scones for Beverly, a small gesture of comfort. Even the young woman who had recorded the video stopped by, smiling quietly, reminding Beverly that her courage inspired action in others. Brandon encouraged Beverly to take moments of normalcy, to sit with a cup of tea and breathe. Each pause, each reflective moment, reinforced her resilience, preparing her for the upcoming legal proceedings. Beverly considered the lessons of patience, dignity, and moral courage, realizing that these values had guided her throughout life and now provided a framework for confronting public adversity. She also noted the community's awakening, the way neighbors, students, and even local officials were beginning to recognize the importance of standing against mistreatment and holding powerful individuals accountable. In quiet moments, Beverly held the photograph of her late husband, James, smiling softly, drawing strength from the memory of his steady, reliable presence. The photograph symbolized her life's continuity, her family's legacy, and the courage that would carry her through the coming challenges. Brandon watched over her, his own experience in the military shaping a calm, strategic approach to justice. Together, mother and son prepared for the trial ahead, their bond fortified by shared purpose, mutual respect, and the understanding that moral clarity could withstand even the most public and humiliating affronts. As the sun set over Collinsville, the streets bathed in golden light, Beverly felt a quiet certainty that dignity, patience, and steadfastness could triumph, setting the stage for justice and lasting community impact. Trial preparations intensified over the next several days. Beverly remained composed, her routine providing small, stabilizing moments amidst the whirlwind of legal meetings, witness interviews, and press inquiries. Brandon meticulously coordinated with attorneys and journalists, ensuring every piece of evidence was preserved and every detail recorded. The teenage girl's video, already viral, was officially submitted as evidence. Former tenants came forward, sharing first-hand accounts of Craig Davenport's intimidation and displacement tactics. Each statement built a pattern that reinforced Beverly's civil suit, demonstrating that the assault in the cafe was part of a broader behavior of harassment and abuse of power. The media coverage was extensive, but Brandon ensured his mother remained shielded from unnecessary intrusion. He translated legal documents, outlined courtroom expectations, and reminded Beverly of her rights at every stage. The community's engagement continued to grow, neighbors offering moral support and symbolic gestures like flowers and letters of encouragement. On the eve of the trial, Beverly reflected on the events that had brought them here. The spilled coffee, Craig's cruel arrogance, the silence of bystanders, and the sudden intervention that had restored justice. Brandon reminded her that her dignity, patience, and composure had been as powerful as any legal argument. She held the photograph of James close, drawing strength from his memory. The courtroom itself became a stage where decades of resilience, civic responsibility, and moral courage would be juxtaposed against arrogance and privilege. As the morning of the trial arrived, Beverly and Brandon entered the courthouse together. Brandon's military bearing, the medals and ribbons of service, and his calm authority projected a quiet confidence. Beverly's presence exuded dignity and quiet strength, her attire simple but immaculate, reflecting both respect for the proceedings and the enduring steadiness of her character. Reporters lined the back wall, their cameras trained, capturing every detail. The courtroom buzzed with tension, the air heavy with anticipation. Brandon remained close to his mother, offering reassurance through touch and presence. Ruth Ann's testimony, the 911 call, the video, and witness statements were all organized for maximum impact. The prosecution presented each piece meticulously, showing Craig's repeated contradictions and aggressive behavior, emphasizing a pattern of intimidation. The defense attempted to minimize the events, framing the incident as a misunderstanding, but the accumulation of evidence and testimony left little room for doubt. Beverly remained composed throughout, observing the proceedings with calm clarity, her moral authority reinforcing the weight of the truth. Brandon's strategic guidance ensured that each point was clearly made, reinforcing not only the legal argument, but the moral imperative of justice. As the jury prepared to deliberate, Beverly felt a mixture of relief and anticipation, knowing that the culmination of resilience, family support, and community witness would soon converge into a decisive moment of accountability. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom fell into a tense silence. Beverly remained calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap, while Brandon stood beside her, vigilant. The foreperson read the verdict, guilty of assault and battery with a hate crime enhancement. Relief and quiet satisfaction settled over Beverly and Brandon, tempered by the gravity of justice having been served. Craig Davenport's attorney attempted to negotiate, but the evidence, including the video, witness testimonies, and patterns of prior harassment, was overwhelming. The judge, addressing Craig directly, cited his deliberate humiliation of Beverly, the pattern of discriminatory behavior, and his attempt to manipulate law enforcement. The sentence was firm: 18 months in county detention, 5 years of supervised probation, community service in the communities he had displaced, mandatory racial sensitivity training, and restitution to Beverly Edwards. The courtroom reacted subtly. Some nodded in approval, others murmured quietly. Beverly remained steady, showing no gloating or triumph, only quiet dignity. Brandon kept a protective hand near hers, reinforcing her presence and strength. Outside, reporters sought statements. Beverly, composed, looked past microphones and cameras, thinking of James and the long journey that had led to this moment. She spoke softly, her voice steady. I feel like my husband would be proud of our son. I feel like maybe this town remembers now that everybody sitting in that cafe deserved to be there, including me. The community, still absorbing the trial's events, began to recognize the importance of standing against intimidation and injustice. Deputy Moore faced review and retraining, reflecting institutional change, while the county sheriff's office implemented new protocols for responding to reports of discrimination or abuse. Beverly's story inspired a wave of awareness, leading to greater vigilance and community support. Brandon was invited to speak at the annual Collinsville Veterans Dinner, sharing the lesson of resilience and moral courage without dwelling on his military career or the trial itself. He highlighted his mother's dedication, strength, and unwavering composure as an exemplar of everyday courage and perseverance. Beverly, listening quietly, felt both pride and affirmation, knowing that patience, dignity, and family solidarity had triumphed. The town slowly resumed its rhythm. The farmer's market operated as usual, the banjo player returned to the corner, and Ruth Ann opened the cafe promptly at 7:00 a.m. Beverly continued her Saturday ritual at 8:15, now with a new cardigan from Brandon, the beaded glasses chain restored, and a renewed sense that her presence mattered. Recognition from the community, smiles from neighbors, and waves from children were small but powerful affirmations that her dignity had been restored. The photograph of James, once stained, now safely displayed the life they had built together. Beverly used the restitution to establish the Edwards Family Scholarship for first-generation college students, creating a legacy that extended her impact into the future. The first recipients, a barber's daughter and the teenager who recorded the viral video, received letters from Beverly. "Your voice matters. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like it doesn't." These words, simple yet profound, encapsulated the triumph of resilience, justice, and the power of moral courage. Beverly's quiet strength had set a precedent, reinforcing that dignity, patience, and truth could overcome arrogance and cruelty. Weeks after the verdict, Beverly Edwards settled back into a quieter life, though the events of that October morning remained vivid in her memory. Collinsville itself had begun to change, not overnight, but in small, meaningful ways. Neighbors were more vigilant, cafe patrons more aware, and the lesson of courage in the face of cruelty had rippled quietly through the town. Brandon remained deeply involved, monitoring the civil proceedings and ensuring the scholarship fund operated smoothly. Beverly took comfort in the continuity of her routine. The small decaf with cream, the blueberry scone, and the warm sunlight streaming through Ruth Ann's windows. Yet she felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't known before. The video of the cafe incident continued to circulate online, now used in educational settings to discuss civility, community responsibility, and standing against harassment. Former students reached out, offering gratitude and reflections on how Beverly's resilience had taught them about integrity, patience, and moral courage. The scholarship fund was making a tangible difference, and the stories of its first recipients became part of Beverly's ongoing legacy. In private moments, she held James's photograph, remembering the steadfastness he had shown throughout life, and the way it had informed her own strength. Brandon frequently reminded her that courage could manifest in small, consistent acts, the ability to maintain composure, to demand respect calmly, and to allow truth to assert itself through action rather than fury. Collinsville's Saturday rhythm resumed, yet the town carried the subtle mark of the incident. A collective awareness, a renewed commitment to support neighbors, and a recognition that silence in the face of injustice was no longer acceptable. Beverly's presence, once unassuming, now served as a quiet symbol of moral authority, showing that patience, dignity, and resilience could shape community values. Brandon, observing his mother's demeanor, felt pride and reassurance, understanding that her influence extended far beyond the walls of Ruth Ann's roost. The story of that morning remained vivid, not as a tale of victimization, but as a testament to the power of courage, family, and community in confronting wrongdoing. Beverly had endured, and through her endurance, the town, and perhaps many beyond, had been reminded that respect, decency, and justice were obligations shared by all. As autumn leaves drifted along the streets, Beverly sat by the window, watching the community move around her. She sipped her coffee, feeling gratitude for the support, love, and lessons that had guided her through adversity. Quietly, she reflected on the balance of patience and assertiveness, Understanding that standing firm in the face of cruelty could inspire change, heal wounds, and build a legacy that outlasted any single act of injustice. The days that followed brought a quiet reflection for Beverly and Brandon. The legal battle had concluded, but the emotional and social ripples of the incident continued to shape their lives. Beverly continued her Saturday visits to Ruth Ann's roost, taking comfort in the familiar ritual of her decaf and blueberry scone. Yet now, each small gesture felt reinforced with a sense of empowerment and dignity. Brandon worked diligently behind the scenes, coordinating with the scholarship fund and monitoring the impact of Beverly's story on the community. He also kept track of media coverage, ensuring the public narrative reflected the resilience and moral authority Beverly had demonstrated. The town of Collinsville gradually absorbed the lessons of that morning. Bystanders began to speak out against harassment. Neighbors supported one another more openly, and small businesses felt the subtle protection of a community that had witnessed accountability firsthand. Beverly reflected often on the past, her teaching years and the values she had instilled in generations of students, realizing that her life's work had prepared her for moments of public confrontation, reinforcing her patience and moral courage. Brandon encouraged her to share her experience, not as a tale of victimization, but as a lesson in dignity, restraint, and strategic action. Together, they engaged with journalists, educational programs, and community leaders, ensuring that the story became a catalyst for awareness and dialogue. Evenings were moments of calm tea and quiet conversation, providing relief from public scrutiny and legal matters. Beverly held James's photograph, tracing the lines of his smile and finding strength in the continuity of family and memory. Brandon reminded her that courage often manifests not in loud defiance, but in measured, deliberate action, and the refusal to surrender dignity. The town itself was subtly transformed. Each Saturday, as Beverly entered the cafe, she noticed neighbors pausing to acknowledge her, students waving from sidewalks, and the small gestures that signaled a cultural shift in collective awareness and moral responsibility. Through this period, Beverly's story became emblematic of the power of patience, resilience, and strategic action in confronting injustice. Brandon's steady presence, guidance, and protective vigilance ensured that the lessons of the incident were amplified and preserved. Beverly realized that standing firm, maintaining composure, and allowing truth to emerge through deliberate, consistent action could effect meaningful change, not only for herself, but for the wider community. These moments of reflection, both private and public, reinforced the value of moral courage, the significance of family support, and the potential of one individual's steadfastness to inspire collective accountability and justice. As the weeks passed, Beverly and Brandon continued to navigate the aftermath of the incident. The scholarship fund became a tangible extension of their values, allowing Beverly to invest in the future of Collinsville's youth. Each Saturday morning, the familiar sights and smells of Ruth Ann's roost brought comfort, yet now each interaction held deeper significance. The community had begun to internalize the lessons of dignity, accountability, and the courage to intervene. Brandon remained a constant presence, coordinating media inquiries, overseeing the scholarship fund, and ensuring the civil lawsuit and restitution processes were executed correctly. Beverly reflected on the quiet strength required to endure public humiliation and how that endurance had served as a catalyst for broader change. Former students, neighbors, and even strangers reached out, acknowledging her courage and the example she had set. Media outlets continued to reference the viral video as a case study in moral courage, civility, and the responsibilities of bystanders. The town's Saturday rhythm was subtly altered, infused with heightened awareness and mutual respect. Ruth Ann continued to serve coffee and scones, each cup a symbol of routine resilience, and Beverly embraced these rituals with renewed strength. Private evenings offered reflection, as Beverly and Brandon discussed the ongoing impact of her story, the scholarship fund, and the importance of fostering a community that recognized and corrected injustice. Beverly often held James's photograph, drawing both comfort and inspiration from the memory of her late husband. Through it all, she understood that moral courage was not defined solely by dramatic moments, but by consistent integrity, the careful assertion of rights, and the support of family and community. The town, now subtly transformed, reflected the influence of this one morning. Neighbors watched more attentively, children learned the importance of respect and advocacy, and the narrative of accountability and dignity became a shared value. Beverly's story, once confined to a single moment of public humiliation, had grown into a testament to endurance, family solidarity, and the power of principled action to inspire meaningful change. Months later, Beverly Edwards found herself reflecting on the lasting impact of that fateful Saturday morning. Ruth Ann's Roost continued to be her sanctuary, the aromas of coffee and baked goods blending with the warmth of routine. Yet every sip and every bite carried the weight of resilience and the assurance of justice served. Brandon remained at her side, managing the scholarship fund and monitoring the civil case outcomes. The first recipients of the Edwards Family Scholarship had enrolled in college, their families expressing heartfelt gratitude, each success story reinforcing the value of Beverly's perseverance. Beverly, holding James's photograph, recognized that the morning's incident had transcended personal humiliation, becoming a beacon of moral authority and community consciousness. The town of Collinsville had internalized the lessons of dignity, intervention, and accountability. Neighbors acknowledged her presence with respect. Students waved from sidewalks, and local business owners incorporated the idea of standing up against injustice into community practices. Beverly's story had been featured in educational programs discussing civility, moral courage, and the responsibilities of bystanders, and she began to engage in workshops and talks, sharing her experience quietly but with clarity. Evenings at home were reflective, the weight of public attention softened by the intimacy of shared memories with Brandon. He reminded her of the quiet power in patience, in measured action, and in the resilience cultivated over a lifetime. The legal outcomes, media coverage, and public discourse had cemented a legacy beyond Beverly's immediate circle, emphasizing that principled conduct could create ripples of positive change. Brandon's guidance ensured that Beverly's influence remained constructive, and the moral lessons were preserved in both the community and the hearts of the scholarship recipients. As autumn arrived again, Beverly sat by the cafe window, watching the world continue with subtle adjustments, informed by the courage she had shown. The photograph of James rested safely in her handbag, a symbol of enduring love and steadfastness. Through patience, dignity, and unwavering composure, Beverly had turned a moment of public humiliation into a transformative experience for herself, her family, and her community. The town's collective memory now included not only the event, but the resilience, justice, and civic responsibility that followed, ensuring that Beverly Edwards' quiet strength would influence generations to come. As the following months unfolded, Beverly and Brandon focused on consolidating the positive changes sparked by the incident. The Edwards Family Scholarship continued to support first-generation college students, becoming a symbol of empowerment and opportunity within Collinsville. Each recipient carried with them the lesson of resilience, dignity, and the importance of using one's voice, reflecting the values Beverly had modeled. Brandon worked closely with community leaders, ensuring that the scholarship, as well as public discussions about the Café incident, emphasized moral courage, civic responsibility, and social justice. Beverly embraced the ongoing educational opportunities, participating in community forums, speaking engagements, and workshops. Her calm demeanor, combined with the narrative of her experience, made her a compelling example of how patience, courage, and strategic action could inspire widespread change. Collinsville itself continued to evolve subtly. Neighbors became more observant and supportive, students more mindful of civility, and small businesses increasingly mindful of the ethical treatment of customers and tenants. Beverly noticed these shifts during her Saturday visits to Ruth Ann's Roost. Familiar faces greeted her warmly, strangers nodded respectfully, and young people seemed to understand the significance of standing up for what is right. Evenings remained a time for reflection, tea, and quiet conversation with Brandon. She held James's photograph close, drawing strength from his memory and the enduring love that had shaped her values. The community, guided by the ripple effects of a single moment of injustice, had begun to internalize lessons about moral accountability, respect, and the impact of action versus silence. Beverly's experience had grown into a living example of how resilience, dignity, and moral courage could shape not just individual lives, but an entire community. Brandon, observing his mother's composure and influence, knew that their actions had laid the foundation for ongoing awareness and ethical engagement within Collinsville. Beverly's quiet, steady presence reminded all who knew her that standing firm in the face of adversity, preserving dignity, and acting with integrity could effect meaningful, lasting change. Each day, she witnessed small victories, children demonstrating kindness, neighbors intervening in small conflicts, and the town slowly transforming into a place more attuned to justice and human dignity. Beverly understood that the morning's incident, while humiliating at the time, had catalyzed a broader movement of awareness, advocacy, and moral courage that would extend far beyond her immediate circle, leaving a lasting imprint on the fabric of Collinsville. By the following year, Beverly Edwards' story had become a touchstone for discussions of dignity, resilience, and moral courage within Collinsville and beyond. The scholarship fund she had established was flourishing, with students sharing their gratitude and inspiring others to advocate for positive change. Each Saturday, Beverly maintained her ritual at Ruth Ann's Roost, the routine now layered with the knowledge that her presence symbolized both resilience and community integrity. Brandon remained deeply involved, balancing his career, family obligations, and the ongoing management of the fund and public relations efforts related to the incident. Beverly reflected on how a single, humiliating act could catalyze widespread awareness and community engagement when met with courage, patience, and strategic response. Collinsville had become more conscientious. Neighbors were more proactive in supporting one another, businesses were mindful of ethical practices, and youth were more aware of the impact of civility and moral responsibility. Beverly continued to hold James's photograph, each glance a reminder of her values and the foundation of strength that had guided her life. Brandon often reminded her that the ripple effects of integrity and moral courage could reach far beyond any single act, influencing community norms, inspiring young people, and shaping cultural awareness. The narrative of that October morning remained central to ongoing discussions, not as a tale of victimization, but as an exemplar of how quiet dignity and the careful assertion of rights can catalyze meaningful change. Beverly's influence extended through the scholarship recipients, the students, neighbors, and citizens who witnessed or learned of her story. She had transformed a moment of personal indignity into a lasting contribution to her community. The town itself bore subtle changes, increased engagement, heightened awareness, and a collective understanding that respect and justice are responsibilities shared by all. Beverly's continued presence, steady composure, and deliberate actions demonstrated that true strength lies in patience, moral clarity, and the support of family and community. Through the scholarship fund, public speaking, and quiet guidance, Beverly's impact continued to grow, reinforcing the lessons of courage, dignity, and the power of principled action. Each Saturday morning, as sunlight filtered through the cafe windows, she sipped her decaf and enjoyed a blueberry scone, embodying both continuity and triumph, her story a permanent imprint on Collinsville's collective memory. The culmination of Beverly Edwards' story arrived not with fanfare, but with quiet reflection and enduring impact. The Edwards Family Scholarship continued to grow, empowering first-generation college students who carried with them lessons of resilience, dignity, and moral courage. Beverly's Saturday visits to Ruth Ann's Roost maintained their comforting rhythm, her small decaf, her blueberry scone, and the warmth of routine grounding her. Brandon remained by her side, ensuring the scholarship's success and guiding her through public engagements. The town of Collinsville had been subtly transformed. Neighbors were more vigilant, students more conscientious, and the community embraced the importance of standing against injustice. Beverly held James's photograph, finding strength and continuity in his memory, reflecting on how moral courage, patience, and steadfastness could ripple outward to effect tangible change. Educational programs and workshops incorporated her story, emphasizing civic responsibility, ethical action, and the courage to act when witnessing wrongdoing. Beverly's life, once defined by quiet service and teaching, had now become a beacon of principled action, inspiring both her community and the broader public. The memory of Craig Davenport's humiliation and the viral video remained a stark contrast, highlighting the power of integrity, composure, and moral authority. Brandon's guidance and protective presence ensured that Beverly's dignity remained intact and that the lessons of the incident were preserved for future generations. As the sun rose on another Saturday morning, Beverly entered the cafe, greeted warmly by neighbors, students, and shop owners. Ruth Ann displayed a framed photograph of Beverly and Brandon from the Saturday following the incident with a handwritten note, "Everybody belongs here." Beverly sipped her coffee, savoring the quiet affirmation of community, courage, and justice realized. She reflected on the journey, humiliation met with patience, cruelty countered by steadfastness, and injustice met with both family support and the legal system. Her story had transformed personal adversity into collective awareness, illustrating that integrity, resilience, and moral courage could reshape lives and communities. Beverly Edwards, quiet yet resolute, looked out the window, her hands folded around her cup, and whispered to herself, "I just wanted my Saturday morning, baby. That's all." Her eyes met Brandon's. He smiled, hand on her shoulder. Together, they had turned a moment of public humiliation into a lasting legacy of dignity, justice, and empowerment. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.